You've stumbled upon Quorum Radio on AM 560 KLZ, Red State Talk Radio, and 24/7 on Spreaker. For this following interview with former Secret Service agent Mike Howard, I give special thanks to Dennis Morissette, who helped make this happen. Much obliged, Dennis. I owe you a cold beer on a hot day. We hear from U.S. Secret Service agent Mike Howard, who was tasked by President Johnson after the JFK assassination with protecting the late Lee Harvey Oswald's family. He has things to say that you've probably never, ever heard in your life. This interview took over a year to set up. Stay tuned.
Say you don't know.
AM 560 KLZ, Quorum Radio on now with Mr. Mike Howard, former U.S. former U.S. Secret Service special agent who worked on the White House detail during John F. Kennedy's and Lyndon Johnson's administration. Got to know the Johnson family. He was present in Texas when our president, John F. Kennedy, was assassinated. I guess you were in Fort Worth, right? Right, Mr. Howard?
Yes, sir.
So I understand that you were conducting a sweep of the Texas hotel in Fort Worth when you got a shots fired message.
That's right.
And just telling people about you a little bit more. So you began your career with the U.S. Secret Service in the late 1950s. You were recruited while studying at Texas Christian University. And Mr. Howard spent lots of time working in Washington in the White House details in Washington, D.C., and in the Dallas Secret Service office. He was quoted in the McKinney Texas Courier Gazette as saying he wishes he had a nickel for every time someone asked where he was at the time of the JFK assassination.
Yeah.
Truth be, you'd have a lot of money there, huh?
Oh yeah, we could go to the movies.
Absolutely. So, truth be told, at the time that President Kennedy was shot, he and his fellow agents had, as I said, just done a security sweep at the president's suite at the Texas. Yes, President's suite at the Hotel Texas in Fort Worth. And so then I understand, sir, you raced to Parkland Memorial Hospital.
That's right. Took us about 20 minutes.
You're probably going about in excess of 55 miles an hour.
In excess, yes.
And now I understand also that while Oswald was in police custody, you were able to listen in on an interview with Lee Harvey Oswald under the direction of the several, okay, Dallas Police Department, and who was charged with the murder of Dallas Police Officer J.D. Tippit. Now, shortly after the JFK assassination, you were tasked with guarding Lee Harvey Oswald's family. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And later on, you spent quite a bit of time with President Johnson's daughter, Linda, and Lady Bird. Long after, and she and her husband left the White House. And then Mr. Mike Howard works currently in Texas law enforcement. Is that right? You're still working for law enforcement, sir, right?
Well, I just got off just about 30 minutes ago.
Okay, that's not too bad for a guy who's in his 60s. That's pretty impressive.
That's pretty impressive when you're 92 years old.
Oh, wow. You sound great for 92. If I sound as good as you do at 80, I'm doing really well.
Well, thank you.
So
appreciate that.
Yeah, sure. No, it's true, Mr. Howard. So let me ask you just quickly as a preliminary, what do you remember about Secret Service training back in the 50s?
What can I tell you about the training that we had at that time?
Yes, sir.
Very little. We came in at the time that I was inducted into the Secret Service. The Secret Service was very small. And they really didn't have the facilities or the time to send you to school at that time. So when we were inducted into the Secret Service, we went right to work. In other words, we would be assigned to another senior agent, if you will, and we would work with them for several weeks until there was an opening to go to school and go into the Secret Service training school. And so that's the way it was. And in fact, to be honest, I worked a $110,000 counterfeit case before I was even sworn in. So sometimes you have to do the things you have to do.
Of course, yeah. That's part of the part of the function of the U.S. Secret Service is also, counterfeiting, as well as protecting the president and other people. So, now, you came in, was it under Eisenhower that you started, Mr. Howard?
Did what?
When you started with the U.S. Secret Service, was it under the Eisenhower administration?
Well, yeah, he was, let's see, let me think just a minute. I'll have to go back a little bit. LBJ was the vice president, and I worked with him so much because he was from Texas and was in Texas a lot, and he happened to like me because I was a full-blood Texan, and so I worked with him a lot more than most of the other agents did because of that. And I knew my way around, and I could drive for him and take him anywhere he wanted to go. So therefore, I was assigned to the Johnson detail long before he was president.
Oh, wow, okay, great. So then, sir, did you also work before John F. Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson were elected?
Yeah.
Were you working also under Dwight D. Eisenhower?
Yeah, but I never did work with Eisenhower. I was working with the Dallas field office, and so Eisenhower, of course, he didn't live in Texas, and so therefore we saw very little of him in Texas.
Right. So, okay, so then let's go to when you started to work with the Kennedy administration and Lyndon Johnson back in, I guess, 1960, 61. He's inaugurated January 1961. Tell us about those first couple of years working in the I assume, were you in the White House most of the time, or in the Dallas field office still, and going back and forth to D.C.?
Most of the time I was in the Dallas field office. Hang on a minute. I'm going to try to put you on speaker.
All right, let's see how it works, sir.
All right, how's that?
Well, it's okay, sure, but it sounds a little distorted.
Oh, well, that's me. I'm distorted, you know. Yeah, can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I hope so. Sure, I can hear you.
I hear you.
I don't know if it'll.
You're perfect this way. I was having a problem hearing you the other way because I was pushing that receiver up against my ear, and I was having a little hard time receiving some of the stuff. This way,
okay, no problem, sir.
It sounds good.
Okay, good. That's great, Mr. Howard. So, tell us about your memories of, working in the Dallas field office while John F. Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson were president and vice president. Yep. What was work like in those days in the Dallas field office?
Well, we were swamped with check cases, counterfeit cases, guarding the families. We were overwhelmed. We didn't have enough people.
Well, okay, so a lot of counterfeiting cases.
Oh yeah.
In that time, sir, before, up until the assassination, were you basically full-time in Dallas?
Yes, I was full-time in Dallas until, I guess I'd been in the Secret Service for maybe a year before they sent me to the White House detail. And they did that because I was working with one of the electives, and they asked for me, and so they just transferred me to the White House Secret Service.
Right. So, what do you remember about? You worked under two administrations, JFK and LBJ.
Yeah.
What were the differences in these two men? What did you notice?
Oh, well, one of them was very well educated and had a lot of couth, if you will. The other one had no couth at all, and they were raised in the country, and their language, when they weren't in front of the people, were to be a little bit less to be had. But it was interesting working for them because I had been around Texans all my life, and so when I was with LBJ and his family, I didn't have any problem identifying with them and talking back and forth with them. And but as far as working with the Kennedys, I had exactly the same working conditions. And Mrs. Kennedy was, of course, one of my favorites that we worked with. But President Kennedy was always very cordial to us. He always was kind to us and the Secret Service. And so therefore I got along very good with him because I was there for him when he was ready for it.
Right. And so what you mentioned Jackie Kennedy. She was your favorite. I understand you're a horseman, and she was a very, very skilled rider, right?
Yes, she was. She was a very skilled rider.
So did that mean that you were kind of assigned to her in a sense, or
From
part of the time you spent?
Well, it didn't come that way. It just almost fell into my lap, you know. When if I was on duty and she was going to ride, well, there was always a horse there saddled for the Secret Service agent that was going to go with them, and of course I was a pretty seasoned rider. I'd been riding all my life, and they knew it, and so therefore it fell in my lap that I ride with her. She didn't ask for me, and I didn't ask for her. One way or the other, it just was there.
Right. So then that when she would, how many days a week would she ride? Was that once a month, a couple times a week?
No, it wasn't much like that, because it's pretty hard to have a horse at the White House for her to ride at that time while she was doing the things that she had to do as First Lady. Now, when they went home and they decided to go out to Rattlesnake Mountain, which was what we called it because it had rattlesnakes all over it before they moved in, but they called it Camelot. And when we'd go to Camelot, well, then, of course, she would like to ride.
And where was this place, this riding place? Was it in Maryland?
If you go out of Washington, you go right by Dulles Airport, and go about 30 miles down, you'll be there at that ranch.
Okay, fine. Okay, so tell us, sir, about the trip to Texas, November 1963. I understand that, it was a really important trip. Can you tell us about the political background of this trip, the personalities involved? There was some tension, I understand, between Senator Yarborough, Vice President Johnson, I don't know, John Connally as well. Can you tell us about that?
Well, now, wait a minute. Now, let's go back and start at the beginning. You've covered a whole lot of subjects there. Which one of them do you want answered?
Well, tell us about Senator Yarborough.
Senator Yarborough, what about him?
Well, how was his relationship with LBJ?
None.
Okay, so they just didn't get along. Didn't see eye to eye.
The only time that they smiled together was when the television or the cameras were on them or questioning them, and then they would do that. The rest of the time, they didn't speak. They didn't like each other. The vice president or the president didn't include him in anything unless they just absolutely had to because of his title.
Right. So, was there any type of let's say, bad feeling between Vice President Johnson and Governor Connally?
Vice President Johnson and Governor Connally?
Yeah. Did they get along pretty well?
They grew up together. They definitely were best of friends.
Oh wow. Okay. Interesting.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, they were best of friends, and they worked before until one of them was dead.
Sure. Okay. Interesting. So, just want to ask you, sir. So, tell us about, what you remember about that last day. You were doing a sweep in the Hotel Texas, I guess.
Yeah.
And and that trip must have been nerve-wracking. What happened? What did you see at Parkland Hospital, sir?
Well, when we drove from Fort Worth to Dallas to the Parkland Hospital to the emergency room where they had the president at that time, when I walked in, it was pretty obvious that they couldn't kept him alive if they'd have wanted to, because half of his head was blown off, and there's nothing like a rifle bullet hitting your skull. But anyhow, that's what had happened, and it was pretty obvious that he wasn't going to be around very long if he had still had a pulse. We couldn't tell that he had a pulse at all, but they kept saying, "Oh, He's got a weak pulse. He's got a weak pulse. Well, they were lying through their teeth. They were just trying to keep him alive, as far as that goes. Hang on just a minute. I've got somebody
no problem.
me, and I can't get them off of there. Well, he's gone. So anyhow, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay, all right, no problem, sir. Yeah, that's all right. You know, this is I don't like to talk about scandalous things and all, but there's a lot of misunderstandings and a lot of, I don't know if you call them rumors or misinformation about the state of the presidential limousine. Is it true that it was basically untouched and it was only really examined when it was flown to D.C., or was it cleaned out? Was it washed out? Or what do you remember, sir?
You mean after the assassination, after they had shot him in the car?
Exactly.
It was, there was blood all over the back two seats. What do you mean? Did we clean it up before we shipped him off to Washington, or what?
Yes, exactly. Because I understand that.
Of course it is.
Well, you tell me, sir. Okay. No problem. Just wanted to know.
Of course we did. We got his. We had people out there cleaning it up right away. They didn't want a messy car going anywhere.
Sure. Okay. All right. Great. Do you have anything to say, sir, about the state of the windshield? Some people claim that, the windshield received a bullet from the front.
No.
Is that true?
No.
Okay.
No. That's it. That's a bunch of scuttlebutt. The only bullets that went into the car was from behind, and who they were being shot at is always going to be questionable. Although that the rifle was shooting 4 to 6 inches to the left when we tested it after the assassination, and the fact of the business was that the person that was hit wouldn't even have been touched had the rifle been zeroed in. But the thing about it is, there were two things that took place when he brought the gun to his workplace. He had it broken apart. He had it broken down in two pieces. He wrapped it in paper, what we call groceries paper. That's brown paper, like you get your groceries in. And when he first got in the car with his friend to drive him to work, where he was going to be going to work in the car, he pitched the gun into the back seat. Any gun that you have with a scope on it, you don't pitch them around. I mean, that scope is very delicate, and it will be knocked off one way or the other, or can be. And so one of the fellow that was driving the car said, "Hey, what you got in the car? The bag there?" He said, "Well, I've got curtain rods. I got to put some curtain rods in my room in Dallas." And so when they got to the book depository, he was asked why he didn't take it up right then. He said, "Oh, I don't need it now. I'll come back down and get it after a while," which meant that I didn't want you to see where I was going to be with that rifle. So anyhow, at about 10 o'clock, he did come back down and get this piece of packages as he walked in. As he walked in, there were three black guys that were standing there at break time. It was about 10 o'clock. They had a break time at 10 o'clock. And instead of going up the elevator then, Oswald went up the stairs. And one of them hollered at him and said, "Hey, what you got there, Lee?" And he just glared at him. He didn't say anything back. He just walked on up the stairs. When he got up to the sixth, And when he got up to the sixth floor, he was working with a black man that was twice his age, and he got along fine with him. And anyhow, the black man told us later that when he came off the elevator, off the stairway, that he pitched the gun over behind some bookcases, and he said, "What you got there?" And he said, "Curtain rods." And he said that was the end of it. And then when they said, "Well, they're going to have the motorcade coming right down below here. If y'all want to see it, come down to the 5th floor. You get a better view because the trees at the top are in the way on the 6th floor." And that was true. And so everybody went down there except one person, and that's Lee Oswald, and he stayed on the 6th floor.
Quorum Radio on now again with U.S. Secret Service agent, retired Mike Howard. Mr. Howard, map out for us, please. Give us the likely scenario. Some minutes before, some indeterminate time. We don't exactly have an idea precisely on how much time prior to the arrival of the presidential motorcade to Dealey Plaza that, what Oswald in all likelihood did and what we can surmise.
And after everybody had gotten down, he called the elevator up to the 6th floor, put a broom handle in it so the door couldn't close and it couldn't go anywhere. And then he undoubtedly, we can only assume that he retrieved this strange package, if you will, mysterious package, and put his rifle back together and went to the window and began to dry fire. Dry fire means he didn't put a shell in the chamber, he just clicked the trigger. He'd look through the scope and he'd click the trigger. So anyhow, that's what he did. Some of the people down below on the sidewalk actually could see what was going on, but they were 6 floors down. You got to give them credit for that. So anyhow, but they did see a man with a rifle out there. One of them said, "Look at there, the Secret Service has got a man up there in the window." So they thought that's who it was, because it was obvious that he was there, and we didn't know about it. Or at least the Secret Service didn't.
Sure. So, sir, tell me about when you went into Parkland, and then they apprehended Oswald, and you went, I guess, to the Dallas City Jail. Do you have what recollections do you have about when you were standing in there and listening to the interrogation by the Dallas police?
Well, we were jammed in there. Where they kept everybody out of the interrogation room except 2 Secret Service agents and a couple of Dallas detectives who were doing the interrogating, because they were the arresting officers for a man who was arrested for shooting someone, but it didn't have anything to do with the president. There were 2 Secret Service agents in there. I was one of them. Right. The other one was Forrest Charles, who was head of the Dallas field office.
Okay. What do you recall about being in there listening to the interrogation?
Well, Oswald, he smiled and he just went on. He didn't act like, he said, these people are just trying to frame me, that's all. He said, I haven't done anything. I haven't shot anybody. And they said, well, what about then they called somebody's name, and he said, I don't know anybody like that. I haven't shot anybody. And he just kept laughing about it.
Sure. Right. And so at any point...
I was told by Mr. Saul to go to answer another call that they had, that they'd picked up somebody over in Fort Worth that they claimed might be the assassin. And so I had to get up and go get in the car and drive over to Fort Worth and see who was over there, and then come back.
What was that all about, sir?
Well, the one that was over there, as it was, he had spent the night there in Dallas with a hippie, with a whore, who was working there in the Blue Moon restaurant, which was nothing more but a bar. And so anyhow, he had come to Dallas from Ranger to pick up his father's deer rifle and also a shotgun that he wanted to buy. And so he picked him up, had him in the car with him all the time, and he picked up this prostitute and took her up to the Union Hotel, and they actually watched the next morning then the motorcade come by there as it was going towards the 6th floor book depository. And of course, we didn't hear the shots and didn't see them because it passed by them, and they said, well, goodbye, I'll see you later. And he got in the car, and he had the 2 guns in the car with him as he was going from Dallas to Fort Worth, after the shots had been fired, after the people had been hit. And so he stopped halfway across the tollway at the only service station that they had on the tollway to get some gas, and the fellow there had the radio going loud, and it was talking about the shot had been fired in Dallas, and this was and that and all that. It was going on about the story. And so the fellow that was filling her up with gas, that he looked in the back window of the car there, and he saw these 2 guns lying on the seats. And anyway, this young man, he made the remark. He said they got that Catholic SOB, talking about Kennedy. And so anyhow,
Yep.
he got in the car and drove off. Well, when he did, this service station operator went in and called to the south entrance to the tollway and had people waiting for him when he got there, and they arrested him as he started through the gates on the south side. And that was why I was sent over to the Fort Worth Police Department to interview this young man that had absolutely nothing to do with the assassination or anybody else.
Okay. That's the first time I've heard an adequate explanation of that.
Yeah,
Thanks
that's
a
what it
lot.
was.
Great. So, sir, later on, I understand that then President Johnson decided to assign you to look after the Oswalds. And I also understand that before Oswald was killed, you actually were you also present when Marina Oswald and Lee Oswald spoke to each other?
Well, you talk about husband to wife and wife to husband in the police department?
Yes.
Yes, and they talked in, they didn't talk in English, so I didn't know, except for the expressions, is about all I could tell about what they were saying.
And what do you remember about the expressions? Was it nothing special, or?
No, he was going on with her about, no, they haven't got anything on me, don't worry about it, they don't know nothing about anything, and so, yeah, but they say so-and-so, and she was worried about being a Russian citizen, that they were going to lock her and the children up if Lee was in the jail. So anyhow, that's what she was worried about. And so if he didn't say, he told her not to worry about it. And so anyhow, that's when I was sent off to interview somebody else.
So, okay. Now, after Oswald was killed, you were, I guess, looking after the Oswalds.
Family, yeah.
What do you remember? Tell us about that. You were, I guess, with Marina, the two children, and Marguerite Oswald, and maybe the translator. What do you remember?
Robert.
Oh, okay, right. That's correct. Sure. So, what do you remember about those days or weeks when you were guarding the Oswalds?
It was days and it was a week. So that it wasn't that long. We just had them for about 6 to 8 days. I mean, it was and we kept them at the end of the Six Flags, hid out in that's what we called it. We had it hid out because we were back in the back end of it where it was new and in a wooded area of the end of the Six Flags, and we had them all in there together.
You have to answer that?
Let me check and see who it is. From 19.
Okay, no problem, sir.
Okay, what else?
At one point, there was some written materials that you apparently saw that had Oswald's writing. What materials did you see that Oswald had written? He had an address book and some other things. I understand you saw that he had a list of people on there.
Well, that was while we were there with Marina Oswald. She wanted to go over to a lady's house by the name of Mrs. Payne. Ruth Payne would be the lady that she stayed with while she was in Dallas, or in Highland Park is where she was. But anyhow, that's where she stayed, and so she wanted to go by there and pick up some clothes for her and the two children. So we loaded the car up and we drove over there for that. While she was there, before they got there, the police and detectives and the FBI had gone there and searched the place looking for any clue that they could find about Oswald. Well, undoubtedly they didn't find a whole lot. But while we were there, Marina walked over to the kitchen, and there this Mrs. Payne had a big shelf there of cookbooks. And Marina walks up and she reaches in amongst the cookbooks and pulls out this little black book and said, "This was Lee's," and handed it to me. And I said, "Oh, wow. That was Lee's." Okay, so I opened it up, and Lord, that's where all this writing was. And so I called this other agent over there, Charles Kunkel, and we looked at it and we read through it, and we immediately called Washington and told them what was in there. And they said, "Well, hang on to that book and don't let anybody get a hold of it." And so that's why that's where the book came in from.
What was in the book, sir?
What was in the book?
Yeah.
Well, I can't tell you. You're not cleared.
Okay.
It don't make a damn who you are now. I mean, I was just joking with you a little bit.
All right.
What
Okay. No problem.
was in there was that he had 4 people that he absolutely was going to kill. He just made it pretty positive. So, well, anyhow, they're the 4 people that you know about already.
Sure.
If you ask me about them, I'll tell you about them.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah. Sure.
so anyhow,
Okay,
that's what that was all about.
Sure. Was it true that he had the names of the former Vice President Nixon, FBI agent Hosty, yeah, Governor Connolly,
Yeah,
and General Edwin Walker? Were those the 4 names, sir?
that was the 4 names, and he had the reason for it. He usually did something with, like Edwin Walker. He called him an SOB, and then he would kill that SOB, and he gave a reason for it because he was a part of a dishonorable discharge that he got from the Army and or Marine Corps, and then he never did say that he wanted to. He wasn't interested in assassinating the person that was assassinated. It was because of the rifle being off. It had a scope on there that had been knocked off, and so therefore it hit the wrong person.
Now, you think he was actually trying to kill Governor Connolly, right?
That's right. And why? Because Governor Connolly had been Secretary of the Navy, and the Secretary of the Navy is in charge of the Marine Corps, and the Marine Corps gave Oswald a dishonorable or an undesirable discharge, and so he had John Connolly's name was signed on it because he was the Secretary of the Navy, and so anyhow. He later said, well, heck, I didn't even know anything about it, but I signed it because he was the Secretary of the Navy. So anyhow.
Sure, of course. Sure, sir, when you saw that list of names, did Oswald write down that I will kill these people, or?
Yes, he did.
Was there?
He said he was going to kill them.
Wow, and was there anything else written on it besides? I mean, did he have a dagger with a blood drop or anything like that, or?
Where did you hear that?
I don't know. I thought I read it. I'm not sure.
All right, you probably did, because under one of the names, he did have what looked like, what appeared to be, droplets of blood off of a knife.
And who was that next to, sir? What name?
Well, it was. I can't remember now. I think it was Walker, but I can't remember for sure. Let's see. I'm not sitting here where I'm looking at my evidence book, so I can't remember.
That's okay, sir.
I'm not going to say because I absolutely can't remember. I think that it was. I just can't remember.
No problem, sir. So it was just wondering. Was Oswald's handwriting pretty clear?
Oh, he printed most of the time.
Okay, right. So
it wasn't let me say this: it wasn't any problem reading it.
Okay, sure. It wasn't like you guessed at it. It was obvious.
In fact, I asked Marina to help me read it in a couple of them, and she helped me read it.
Oh wow! So did she point this out to you, sir?
I asked her. I said, "What's he saying here?" And she told me.
Oh, wow, okay, right. But I mean, but he wrote, "I will kill" in English or Russian?
Yeah. No, it was in English.
Okay. And sir, let me ask you: when you saw that shocking bit of evidence, at least of his intention, did you give that to the FBI eventually, or who eventually got that address book?
Did not give it to the FBI. The FBI was doing nothing, but they were the most misunderstood people in the world. They were a good organization, but they were going about this thing the wrong way for this particular type of operation. And so therefore, they didn't get too far. I turned them, Charlie Kunkel and I turned this evidence this book over to our people in Washington. We had it packed up and had it specially shipped directly to my boss in Washington.
Okay, so at any time did anybody take a photograph of it and at the hotel, or was it just shipped off?
Where did you hear that? I never heard that before in my life.
I'm just asking. I have no idea that happened, sir. I'm just asking if it was.
Nobody in our group. There was only two of us that were federal agents there, and neither one of us took a picture of it.
Okay, so now supposedly there was a cookbook that Marina had that had a letter in Russian in that. Do you remember that, sir?
He had a cookbook, and it had a letter in it.
All right, is that? Yes, sir. Yeah. Is that? Do you remember anything about that?
Wait a minute. A while ago, I told you that she took this book out of the cookbook shelf. It was about the size of the other cookbooks, but it was a black book that they had notes. Her notes were in there, or Oswald's notes was in there, and so it was it looked like a cookbook, but it wasn't a cookbook, and I heard nothing about the cookbook having the letter in there.
Okay. All right. So that was.
Well, I sure got a funny phone going today.
Yeah.
I can't get it. I can't answer it. I don't know what this is.
All right. No problem. No problem, sir. So what I want to ask you is that besides that I will kill list, what else was in that? What else do you remember, or what else did you see in that book with Oswald's writing in it?
Well, that was the only thing. Only one page of it that was of interest. The rest of it was just a cookbook, He had all kinds of stuff written in there about phone numbers and addresses of people that he knew and was going to see and this sort of thing, but that's about all. But that one page was all that we were interested in.
Sure. Now, okay, just wondering, what color was the ink? Blue, black? Remember anything about it?
What if I told you it's in pencil?
Okay, great. That's good enough for me. I mean, you saw it, not me.
Yep.
I was 5 years old when all this happened. So.
Oh, yeah, well, good luck. I wish I was.
Yeah, so, but later on, though, apparently Ruth Payne brought over something that had a letter. Do you know anything about the letter in Russian? Did that come to your attention? That supposedly Oswald wrote when the night he took a shot at General Walker? Did you ever see that?
A letter.
Yeah, supposedly he wrote a letter to Marina for the night that he took a shot at General Walker in April 10th, I think, 1963.
Well, I don't know about him writing a letter to her. He came running into the house and was all sweaty and hot, and she asked him, "My God, what have you done now? What have you done now?" And he said, I've shot that son of a bitch, General Walker. He said he won't do any of that to anybody else, and so he thought that he had killed him when he didn't even get him.
Okay. Well, okay. So, I want to ask you, do you have any particular memories of Marina Oswald?
Do I have? Huh?
Any memories of Marina Oswald?
Now, you're talking about the wife?
Yes, sir.
Oh,
the wife.
She was lovely. She and I got along real good. You see, she liked me because, number one, I helped her get diapers for the baby, and I helped her get powder for the baby, I helped her get pablum for the babies, and so therefore, I helped her do so many things that she needed, clothes, etc., 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 just kindnesses, and because of that, I became a very good friend, and to this day, listen, I talked to Marina some years ago, she lived down at Floresville, somewhere down here now. But my wife and I met her at a restaurant over here, and we're still talking friends.
How was she doing when you spoke to her last, sir?
The last time?
Yeah.
Well, for one thing, she'd learned to speak English fluently. And
Right.
At the time we had her in custody, it was tough going because I'd have to figure out what she was trying to say, and that's why we kidnapped this Russian interpreter for us, and he helped us interpret what she was saying.
Right. So, you also there with Marguerite Oswald.
That's a memory I like to remember that I'd like to forget. You know that?
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I guess that she was...
I want to say this, and I'll say it, and you can put it in print any way you want to, but if I ever met a bitch of a woman, she was it. She was what was wrong with Lee. I mean, she had 3 husbands and 3 boys. Each one of the husband gave her a boy, and she divorced him. Another boy, she divorced him. Another boy, she divorced him. She was the most hateful woman that I have ever seen in my life. And
wow.
I'm talking to her children.
Wow.
None of her husbands claimed her.
Wow. So, you have also, you remember Robert Oswald? He was
I do. One of the nicest guys you'd ever meet.
Yeah, it's an amazing thing that his little brother turned out the way he did with his problems. I mean, he went through a really, really bad time.
Who?
Robert.
Yeah.
Nobody wanted to bury his brother. No minister wanted to. No member of the clergy wanted to have anything to do with him.
I'm fully aware of it. I helped him do it.
Wow. So, your memories of the funeral, the burial.
Yep.
What can you tell us about that, sir?
Well, not much to tell. Nobody wanted to take it. I took. Robert came to me nearly in tears and asked me if I'd help, and I got a hold of a funeral director that my father had worked with. My father was a funeral director, or had been. And,
oh, really?
Oh, yeah. And so anyhow, wow. I got a hold of a funeral director, and he said, well, I don't much want to do that. And I said, look, as a favor to me and my dad, will you sell him a casket and take care of embalming him and help me get him buried so we can get this thing out of the way? And he said, okay, I'll do it. He did.
Wow. It's amazing. It's just a tragic story. So after that, sir, do you have any memories about associated with Lee Harvey Oswald and the family after that? Was it pretty much just nothing special from that moment on after Lee Harvey Oswald was buried on the 25th?
Well, we did well. Of course, after that, Marina was the center of attraction because she was the only one left that knew anything about what Lee did. And so she helped me to sort out some things, and we sorted it out for some of the other investigators. I even called a couple of FBI agents and told them if they'd come to where we wanted them to, that I'd let them talk to her. That's what they wanted. Well, they tried to sneak in. They almost got shot. We had a guy up there in the woods with a Thompson submachine gun, and he almost killed them. And
I
said, wait a minute, who are they? Oh, they claim to be FBI, but nobody with FBI would come walking down through there, and he was right. They shouldn't have.
Oh my gosh!
And they just almost lost it. And one of the FBI agents had been a horse's butt before, and he was one that had harassed Marina during the time before, because his job was to come by and check her out once a month because she was from Russia, and that's what the FBI's job was. Anybody that was from a foreign country, they had to check them out every once in a while, and that was his job. And so Oswald himself, Lee, was never there when he came by, and he complained about it, and he wrote it up in his reports.
So, it was that the FBI agent that was almost shot. Was that James Hosty, or is it somebody else?
With Hosty and one other agent, I can't remember his name. It seemed like it was some color of Joe White.
Amazing.
I can't remember his name.
Right. So what I've read about Marina is that she liked you guys a lot,
Yep.
the Secret Service, and she did not like the FBI a lot.
No, she said, in fact, the business when these two came down to, we had told her, if you come here, we'll see if we can get you in to talk to her. And so when we opened the door then to the apartment where Marina was, she saw them and she said, no. And so I shut the door and I said, Marina, what's it? No FBI. They're bad.
Wow.
Bad. And she would not talk to them.
Oh my gosh. Wow, that's shocking. The first time I've heard this,
Well, that's what happened.
Wow. So, sir, were you, when Oswald was shot, were you at the Dallas City Jail, or were you at the Secret Service office, or just home, or what?
No, I was in Fort Worth checking out another guy that they said might be part of an assassination. He was a kid from Ranger, Texas.
Okay. So, all right. At any point, did you have an opportunity to talk with Howard Brennan, the witness?
Who?
There's a gentleman, a steam fitter, named Howard Brennan, who saw Oswald. Did you ever talk with him?
No, I knew who he was, but I had no reason to talk to him. Why would we want to talk? Now, but give me a clue. What is it? What are you talking about?
Well, Howard Brennan saw Oswald at the 6th floor window.
Oh, yeah. Oh, he was one of the people that was down on the street. He did. He saw him at first. He thought he was a Secret Service agent. And then he realized that he wasn't supposed to be up there with a rifle, and he pointed it out to one of the policemen there, and the policeman got a hold of somebody. And by the time that kid got around, well, the shots had already been fired, and he was gone.
Right. So, sir, was there anything else that you had to investigate that weekend or the days that followed the assassination?
Listen, I would be lying if I told you that there was nothing else to be investigated, because we were busy every day and every night. I didn't get any sleep for 3 days, 3 nights.
Wow.
So we were busy, I'll say that, and there was investigations going on. If there wasn't something, there was something else, and President Johnson was right on top of it. Fortunately, he knew me because I had driven him so many times, and because of it, unfortunately for me, he would call and say, give me Mike. And so he knew me by Mike because I was a driver for him. And that's all. And but that's how come that I was so close to him.
And so I imagine you probably knew Rufus Youngblood as well?
Just happened to know him pretty well, yes.
Right. Did you get to know Clint Hill pretty well, too?
Worked with both of them very close. We were all right in there together.
What you mentioned about the site being jostled and maybe getting out of line, and it wasn't no longer zeroed in, maybe that makes sense, but I don't know.
Yeah.
But I do think that Oswald committed the assassination. I think maybe he was coaxed and egged on to fire at JFK by the Cubans. But anyway, that's what some people speculate.
Well, that's what people want to think. Now, I'm not trying to be derogatory towards you or anybody else, but that's what people want to think. Why would he want to kill somebody like General Walker, who wasn't anybody at all? Why would he want to do this one? And why was that? He had no idea, and he never mentioned to Marina or any of the family, Robert, any of the family, that he even thought about taking a shot at the president. He never did. People want to believe that that was his whole object in the first place. His whole plan was to get these others and then get the president. Well, that's horse hockey. He didn't at all. He always said that about President Kennedy, that he was such a nice guy.
Yeah, it's sure. That's what Marina said, and
Yeah.
they thought of him as kind of an ideal,
Yeah.
leader.
I can't go against that. I just don't.
Sure.
I do not believe that he was smart enough, in number one, to even plan something like that. But at the same time, I'd get on a witness stand for that one. I wouldn't.
Sure.
I wouldn't believe that at all.
And by the way, I spoke to a friend of his.
Who?
Lee Harvey Oswald had a friend in Russia named Ernst Titovitz.
Do you think he had a friend?
Well, let me tell you.
I'm just kidding.
That's
he
okay.
did. He had a good, close friend in Russia that he met there, and he was an American, and he was really close. He got close to him, and they buddied together, they palled together while he was there, and because they were both seemed to be there for the same reason.
I interviewed him twice, and
that's the guy
he's
that
really.
That's the guy that I know.
He's a really nice guy, and he said that Oswald was not violent by nature.
Mm-mm.
He may have said also that he liked JFK. I'm not sure about that. Something I should ask him. But, well, listen, Mr. Howard, it's been great having the opportunity to finally interview you.
Yeah.
I owe you a cold beer on a hot day. And one of these days, God willing, I'll be in the great Lone Star State, and I can meet you and bring you some Peruvian coffee. Do you like coffee, sir?
No.
Okay.
I do not drink coffee. I drink hot chocolate, but I do not drink coffee. You know why I don't drink coffee? I went into the Army in 1950, and everything that you could get to drink in the Army was coffee and water. Coffee and water is all that you could get. And I took my first taste of coffee, and I said, I'm not about to drink that crap. It tastes like horse piss. And that's exactly what I said. And it just reminded me of it. And I never have. My wife, to this day, is a coffee drinker. She drinks coffee every morning. And I sit there and I drink my hot chocolate with her. But I don't touch it.
Well, you know something? Peru has fabulous chocolate.
I know.
Spectacularly.
I know. I went down there with Linda Bird Johnson. I used to travel with her a lot, and she and I both like hot chocolate, and we found that was one of the best places to get the richest chocolate, if you will, and you didn't have to put 2 tablespoons like you do with American coffee, chocolate. You didn't have to put but about half a teaspoon, and that stuff was good. We enjoyed it.
All right. Well, listen, Mr. Howard, thanks a million. Yes, sir.
All right.
You're listening to Quorum Radio on AM 560 KLZ, Red State Talk Radio, and 24/7 on Spreaker.